All right, now in its 10th year, the Doc Talk Podcast, you are watching on YouTube. If you're listening, you're probably watching or listening rather on Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, iHeartRadio. Thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to all those channels. And speaking of YouTube, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so and share this video with one of your friends, because for the first time ever, we have taken a full podcast on the road. That's right, we are on the road, and this is a place I never thought I would actually be, because I am back on the University of Nebraska campus. I am in the North Stadium complex, and we are joined, Dr. Rob Zadiska. You're pretty excited about this, aren't you?
I am. It's an Iowa guy.
It's two Iowa guys hanging out. Now, most Nebraska fans aren't going to hear that, but we are in the office of Nebraska Athletic Director Troy Dannen. And Troy, thank you for joining this podcast.
You have no idea how many "Do not let Travis enter this building" signs we had to take down to enable this podcast to happen today.
Oh, my goodness. That hurts. The sad thing is, I covered Nebraska from 94 until 2010. I was telling Rob, I have not been back down here since like 2012. This is my first time here, and I cannot believe how much it's changed.
It's my guess is if you were to go next door into the Osborne Legacy Complex and you were here a year ago, you wouldn't believe how much things have changed. There have been a couple national reporters here doing their circuit to start the year, and they've walked through that facility, and so I haven't seen anything like it. No place. It's pretty spectacular.
Rob, do you feel cheated because you were a South Stadium guy?
You know what? At the time, though, this was the place with the great facilities. I mean, you got to keep in mind, things were just different 30 years ago. It's part of college athletics in this day and age. And I hate sitting in an athletic director's office and saying, you've got to play sort of this arms race when it comes to facilities, things of that nature. But you really do. And at the time, I understood that as well, too. I mean, when I was here, we had the largest weight room in the world. That's kind of what it always got billed as. And I remember Texas A&M redid their weight room after, it might have been the 90 or 91 season. And as soon as they finished that and proclaimed it as the new largest weight room in the world, guess what? Nebraska redid their weight room and added on X number of thousands of square feet and made it, again, Nebraska became the largest weight room. So you had that. But at the time we had, in our minds, from what we knew, the facilities here were always amazing. And it's nice seeing this now, because you always want to be that place that you can point at and say, like, hey, if you want to come someplace that has the best, come to Nebraska. But we had that back then. Now, it was a lot different. I remember because I took recruiting trips to Iowa and Iowa State, and you're looking around, and these are major universities with successful athletic programs. But back in 1989, you're looking at those facilities and going like, man, this is nothing compared to Nebraska.
Well, and in today's day and age, I was trying to explain to somebody a little earlier, this is not like Kansas City where the pro team wants a new stadium, so they go to the city, the state. When you want to make improvements to the facilities here, you raise the money. Most of it's not public money, if any of it's ever public money. You don't have the threat of going somewhere else. But we're trying to keep a 100-year-old stadium operating to 150 and 200. We're not tearing these things down and rebuilding them. So, one thing Nebraska's done a remarkable job of historically is keeping its facilities in great shape. But at the time, Rob, the facilities were about recruiting. You built these palaces in order to incentivize kids to come. I would tell you right now, that's not necessarily number one, number two, or number three on their list. Other things have taken the place, but you still have to have, we said the four cornerstones: facilities, fans, coaches, and kids. And so the facility cornerstone, it continues to get better and better. But a lot of us have been in a lot of places, never seen anything like what we have here in Nebraska.
So let's dive into something here real quick. Going to grass on the turf, when you talk about facilities, when you're talking about the playing surface, that's kind of the new news recently. That I kind of feel like that came out of left field. What was the impetus for that decision? Because, I mean, it's something we've talked about it on the podcast in the past, and it didn't seem like anything that was going to happen here. You didn't hear anything spoken about it up until all of a sudden, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to have a grass surface.
I think welfare and health and safety. We have a football coach here who believes in grass and believes in the surface and doesn't believe in turf. And not that turf's not safe and can't be safe, but statistically, I think we all know grass is a better surface. That's why everybody in the NFL wants to play on grass, right? And that's why we don't spend any time inside the indoor facility of the Hawks unless we absolutely have to due to weather. Matt will prefer, and that's one of the reasons why we redid the grass in the 2 practice fields, would prefer to be out there until the last practice of the season, if at all possible. And then now with the playoff and the idea that, hey, your season may last a home season till the middle of December. I think the fact that we wanted to have a surface that was, as this game continues to evolve, was the safest, was the best for player welfare. You talk about, there's things you can do in the stadium with turf that you can't do with grass. Well, every grass surface is able to be covered, and they don't put tarps down anymore. You put some hard plastic matting over it, and then you pull it back up. So it's not a matter of we wouldn't be able to do anything less or maybe do anything more, but it's a welfare issue now. It did come out of left field, but I'm 4 months in. So, part of my thinking is if we can have grass, we have grass, and certainly Matt's a big proponent of it. So it's been on the plans for quite a while. Really, when I got here, Matt gave me a list of 17 things. Going back, so I flew in, landed here about 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, I think, or a Tuesday night.
We remember it. You called us.
I called you. That's right. I think you said this is episode 16. I've been on 2. But then I came to the stadium, and Matt handed me a folder. He had 17 things in it that he identified as we need to get these things done if we're going to win. A lot of them were things that maybe he thought we got in our own way a little bit. 17 things, and one of those things was we need to get a grass surface. So I took to heart. Man knows how to coach football, and he's won in a lot of places. He's won a lot of harder places to win than Nebraska. So trying to look at that list of 17 things and say, how can we get those things operationalized here for him?
So 2-part question when it comes to the grass. First of all, fans around here are in love with turf or have been. Any fan pushback from going to grass?
Well, I haven't heard from any fans about it. I don't think none of them are going to play on the surface. They ask the players, they want to play on grass. Now, turf's advanced. There are some things that you do with turf today that the black pebbles almost don't exist anymore. And so, I don't know how much safer, how much softer from a contact. It's not just knees, it's concussions and other things. I know we've had turf for a long, long time, but at the end of the day, I want to put a surface in that our coach thinks is going to help us win games. And really approaching everything from that mindset. Some people might disagree or agree with it, but I want to win. And you've heard me say this, I want to win in everything. And I've got an expert sitting in that football coaching office that knows what it takes from an infrastructure standpoint to do it. So I want to try to get those things done.
Well, and you talk about turf has changed. Grass surface has changed a ton. I mean, I think one of the things, I've heard from fans, I've heard both sides. They're like, I don't know if this is a good thing. And other people say, no, this is a great thing. As a former player, I would have killed to play on grass. Yeah. Looking back on it, I was like, would have loved it. But we had.
Well, that's where I was going to go. You got to go back to 2017. We actually did a podcast on natural grass. There's a guy from Nebraska who runs the grass turf program at Penn State, and he begged us to be on the podcast, and we brought him on, and he really convinced us because of he used Lambeau Field as an example, the way you heat grass, grow grass, and it's almost cost neutral compared to turf. And it used to be the huge cost savings.
And he had served as a consultant on Haymarket Park when they put the grass in there as well.
And this would be heated. The practice fields will be heated as well. And when you say heated, there's warmer water or water flowing underneath. It keeps those roots alive. You put some type of cover on it to keep it from burning on the top, and then eventually it'll go dormant. You'll take it off, and after the season's over, it'll go dormant, and you'll be ready to go again in the spring. So grass has changed. What you do underneath of the surface has really changed with grass. We've done a lot of looking. I think Kansas City is probably the model for what we're looking at. We're using the turf grass folks here on campus. We've got great experts. This is the land grant institution. We know how to grow grass here, so we're using them and their advice. And I think the question is, believe it or not, Bermuda grass, the new variations of Bermuda grass is probably not bluegrass anymore. Maybe it overseeds a little bit late, but it's probably a Bermuda grass surface. That's what we have on top of the practice fields right now, and it seems to work well. And the question at this latitude, does Bermuda grass thrive? And I'm going to take the position of the experts who know how to raise grass and say yes, it does.
See, that's a sign of a true leader right there. People know more than I do, and just trust their opinion on it.
You will find a lot of people that know more than I do about most everything. So,
I have to pinch myself because it was literally 2 years ago, about right now, I was sitting in your office at Tulane University, and you and I I'd called you and said, hey, you invite me down to your office. We sat there for about an hour. We got on the golf cart. We went all around campus. Have you had to pinch yourself to just from 2 years ago to Washington to here? Have you just had time to go, man, it's been crazy the last 2 years?
Well, even the last year from Tulane to Washington to here, and I was just having a conversation. It's kind of surreal because I had my dream job. I went to my alma mater and I did this, and I'll always consider that my dream job. But at the same time, I would have never dreamed about having this opportunity. In our world, the athletic director's world, Nebraska is an elite job. One's the infrastructure we talked about. Two, the financial resources. But three, the give-it-arn factor. And sometimes people say, well, it's people care too much. I'd rather have people care too much than not enough. And the fact that this is the state's program, and it means so much to so many. You put that all together, it is a surreal opportunity. And what people don't know that are watching this podcast, we joked when you and I first met each other, we both parted our hair in the middle.
That was 30 some years ago.
It was a long time ago. We were not parting our hair at Tulane, but the fact that brought us together again when your daughter was down there, and then certainly now here we are interacting again. It's good proof that the world is a big circle, and eventually everything intersects again.
And if you're wondering if he's saying just the right things, when he said it's an elite job, I can tell you that before you even had the job, when it became open, you texted me that day. I hope you don't mind me revealing this. And you just said, hey, what do you know about it? And you said, this is one of the top 5 jobs in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, so that was before I think you were even contacted. You'd reached out.
Oh yeah. And I hadn't been at Washington, but a short time. And I joked, had I known that Nebraska may ever opened, I probably wouldn't have, gone there. But then again, I'm not sure I could have gotten this job from Tulane. So, destiny's unbeaten. And somehow, some way, it brought my family here. Very thankful for that. Because the opportunity's here. Coming off of the year that Nebraska just came off of, right? Both basketball teams, obviously, John's going to have volleyball in the position that it's in on a regular basis. What baseball did. Track and field, track might have finished top 2-3 in the country if all their athletes sitting out getting ready for the Olympics would have competed this year. So there's just this success, across the board. And people have talked to me about Matt Rule. Say, oh boy, I hope you can keep Matt Rule. Well, you know how you keep somebody is put them in a position to win. And what's been demonstrated here in Nebraska is my predecessors, those who built the department, they've put our coaches and our programs in a position to win. And that more than anything else, it's 90-hour weeks. You want to win. You want to see the fruits of all that time, effort, energy, and success happen. And just having been here 4 months now, I want the people that pour their heart and their soul and their passion in this place to experience great. I know they've experienced national championships. I also know what they've experienced the last few years. I want them to experience winning. That's the fun part of all of this, and nothing's worth doing if you don't have fun doing it.
You talk about getting a little bit closer to home or coming back to this part of the country. You're from Iowa originally.
Yep.
Marshalltown?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm just outside of Marshalltown.
Did you go to high school there?
I went to high school at LDF. It does not exist anymore. It's East Marshall at 38, my class. It's one of those places where at my level of athleticism, you could play everything because there was only 38 in your class. Wouldn't have played if I'd gone to Marshalltown. I probably wouldn't have even gone out for a sport. But, the neat thing about growing up on a farm and in a small school is you got a lot of opportunities that you might not have otherwise gotten.
No. Tell them your Iowa connection.
Oh, my dad's a Marshalltown kid. Yeah. So
I didn't know your dad was a Marshalltown kid.
Yeah.
I knew you were the Iowa guy, but
both my mom, dad, and father-in-law all from Iowa. So
and then,
I got to be nice.
Which one went to Northern Iowa? Both of them?
Yeah, my dad graduated from Northern Iowa. My mom started there, and then my dad went up to grad school at Michigan State. So my mom finished her bachelor's there.
Northern Iowa is a great place. Mostly Iowa students, Iowa kids. Everybody went home to have their mom do their laundry the weekend. But, there was great success there. I mean, the coaches that were there when I got there are still there today. Volleyball, men's basketball, football, and then Tanya Warren and the women's basketball win and win and win. It was a great place with great coaches, but that goes back to that cornerstones I was talking about. You got great coaches. In Northern Iowa had great facility. You can make anything happen if you get good people.
And you get to play them this year. Have you talked to Coach Farley about that?
I have not. I've talked to a lot of the supporters and donors up there. Most of them asking for sweets, things like that.
Now they're your best friend again.
They are. But I'm looking to see him. Mark's done a whale of a job there and is a great coach. But Mark is New Rockney. I mean, if you ever heard him talk, he'll get you to run through a wall. So one thing about playing Northern Iowa here, they will be immensely well prepared and highly motivated to come out for that football game.
Yeah, Mark does my radio show every week during the fall, and we've developed this. He's an unfiltered guy. He'll just tell you exactly what he feels, and he's just a good guy to be around. Now, what has been your biggest adjustment? So you went from New Orleans, cultural capital of the world, to Seattle. I'll keep my political beliefs out of Seattle. And then you come to Lincoln. But there's a lot to take in, and that is the stadium renovation, all sorts of stuff. What's been the biggest personal adjustment for you, then the biggest professional adjustment for you?
Well, personal adjustment was easy. I basically left my family. I have a 11 and a 10-year-old, and I left my family to go to Washington. Couldn't find a house out there, so they decided to stay through the end of the school year. So I saw them a few days here and there, and of course, Washington in the Sugar Bowl, I got to stay back at home for a couple of weeks. But other than 2 or 3 days at a time, I didn't see my family for about 9 months. And so it's nice to be back together, which at least we've had the month of July all together here in Lincoln. Professionally, it's scope and scale. Every athletic department has, we have the same sports, right? We have coaches, same number of coaches. We have athletes. The scope and scale here is special and unique, and not just because it's a big budget. It's the centerpiece of a state. I have a chance to talk to the governor. I have a chance to talk to politicians. I have a chance, I'm interacting with people that I haven't interacted with because of their role. I was fortunate enough. I had to hire some positions. I think we've built a really, really good staff with people who've seen this work in other places. And to your point earlier about getting good people, this is a relationship business, and getting good people, smart people who know how to make things work and do it in a way that I consider to be of high character. Because at the end of the day, whether you win or you lose, the one thing cannot happen here is the Nebraskans get embarrassed by anybody or anything within this program. And so doing it in the right way. So we've got a really good group there. But I say, professionally, it's just scope and scale. Now, I haven't seen a basketball game other than the one I went to in Memphis. I have not seen a football game. So I will have a different answer for you after the UTEP game, I'm sure. And I'm really looking forward to that. But right now, it's just getting our arms wrapped around what we've got.
Travis kind of touched on some of the things you came into here professionally with, like the plans on the stadium renovation. Is that something that's going to happen, or what form is that going to take, at least in the immediate future?
Well, I think the stadium renovation does happen. I kind of hit somewhat the pause button And that's really for a couple of reasons. Number one, the plans were to take the South Stadium down after this year, and we weren't ready to do that. We weren't ready from a fundraising standpoint. We weren't really ready from a design standpoint because we hadn't really looked at East and West yet. And secondly, with the new era coming of revenue sharing, and the fact that we are going to have a $20+ million line item in our budget now to share revenue with the student athletes, we can drop a lot of balls. We can't drop that one. We have to make sure we fund it. We have to make sure it is a priority, because back to those 4 cornerstones, if you will, you can argue what's most important, but I'll tell you what the answer is, and it's the athletes. It doesn't matter what our facilities are, doesn't matter what our coaches are, doesn't matter how much our folks want to invest. If we don't have athletes here, we're not going to win. And so making sure we're able to invest in the athletes, priority number one. And so making sure that gets done right. At the same time, we're doing stadium planning. There'll be more iterations of things that get done with the stadium over the next couple of years. But whether we go east and west first, which there's the ability to monetize it, when you build these stadiums, right? If we have to take $100 million loan out to buy it and it costs $10 million a year to pay it back, I need to generate 11. And so, one, it helps pay those athletes, but 2, it pays off the debt. So finding a model where that works, it's going to take a little bit of time. And the one thing that I really didn't want to do is rush into any action, if you would, having been here 2 months on the job. And that's disappointing to some people because there's a lot of work that's been done by a lot of really good people.
I was going to ask if you ruffled any feathers.
Yeah, and I think I don't know ruffle feathers. I think most people understood, but I don't want to diminish the work that had been done because it's really good work, and it's really, I think, put us in a good position. It's not like we have to reinvent the wheel. It's just a matter of, hey, can we tweak this? Can we tweak that? In some ways, it's a macro version of when Matt came in and replaced Scott in the middle of the Go Big project. And Matt has different things he wants and he thinks he needs. And so there were some changes made in that project along the way. And so our changes may be more scope and timing than they are actual what does it physically look like. But it'll get done. We need to win. And I think really to get buy-in, to get the financial support, is going to come in parallel with winning. It's going to come in parallel with having to do some things that we haven't had to do, like reseat the stadium, finding ways to generate additional revenue. And that'll upset a lot of people when that happens. But part of the job that lies ahead is to make sure I'm not trying to be competitive with Nebraska of 1974 or 1989 I'm trying to be competitive with Ohio State of 2024. And so finding ways to do that and to make sure, it is an elite job, but we need elite outcomes. We need to be in elite positions. And so how do we do all of that? The stadium's a big part of it.
When you look at, you mentioned the stadium, almost every inch has to be a revenue generator, right? I mean, you are now looking for a place to generate revenue. And if you have an expense of, let's say, $20-25 million a year that's going to pay athletes, do you see, you've been a very big proponent of the collective. You've encouraged people to get involved. Do you see the collectives not going away, but their influence diminishing if the payroll comes out of the university budget?
I think there's a little bit of that to be determined. The collectives are going to have a role, whether it's the role that they have today, whether it's as a marketing agent, whether they became a marketing agency for us as a way to, kind of like what Missouri has done, right? Which is essentially pay their collective out of the athletic department and to be a marketing agency for the athletic department, to use the athletes to build brand for the athletic department. I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. I think a lot of it will depend on how revenue is shared, and that's an unanswered question at this point in time. And, if there's a certain amount of revenue coming in to the athletes through the athletic department, it may be hard to incentivize donors to give to the collective to give more to the athletes. If there's less, it may be a different argument. So I think in some ways it's an unanswered chapter in the book just yet. I think the one thing that's absolute is the collective is going to have a role. And I will also say this, and I've said this a lot, Travis, thankfully the collective has been there for us because we talked about facilities. This is why students pick schools today. When I was growing up, it was because of the degree, and then it became the facilities, and then, there are a lot of other reasons more holistic in nature. But today, it's a business transaction, and I don't fault anybody for it. People,
because we're no different, right? I mean,
we're no different.
We're no different. You took a job at the ortho hospital because it paid well. I picked a job because I was happy there and I got paid well. You're getting paid well.
That's right. The thing to remember is the romance of the past is not gone. 20 years from now, today will be the romance of the past. And if you go back in time, the romance of the past for any of us is whatever happened 20 years ago. When my parents raised me in the 70s and 80s, it was about, boy, the 50s and 60s. If that was the era we were in, things were so much better then. And so we always look back 20 years ago and say, boy, I missed that time. And we will do that same thing. It's just different. But you know what? We're going to find a way to thrive in it. That's the great challenge here and the great opportunity here as well.
We're going to take a quick time out. Just pause real quick to thank a couple of our sponsors, including G-Defy Shoes. Revolutionary comfort. Highlight Gravity Defy's Verso Shock technology, which is clinically proven to relieve knee pain, transforming harmful shock into positive energy to enhance comfort and performance. So focus on your foot health. You get a 60-day try-defy guarantee. Just go to gravitydefier.com. Use the promo code DocTalk at checkout. Save $20 on orders of $100 or more before taxes and shipping. Or use promo code DocTalk30 at checkout and save $30 on orders of $150 or more before taxes and shipping. Husker Hounds voted Best of Omaha in 2024. In fact, 15 years running. 2 locations in Omaha and online at huskerhounds.com. Noggin hats in stock for $99.99. Black shirt Spirit Game chains. Just $24, and anything you can think of, Scott and his team at Husker Hounds most likely have it. They are fully stocked with their biggest inventory selection in 29 years. The Orr Law Group. Connor Orr is our resident NIL expert. He's a damn fine lawyer, too. The Orr Law Group is a general practice and can help with any type of litigation. Contact Connor today at 402-408-6488 or email Connor Orr at orlawgrp.com or visit the website orlawgrp.com. All right, so Scotty from Husker Hounds did want me to ask this. He wants you to have a lot. He wants you. There's not a bigger Husker fan than Scott from Husker Hounds.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
He bought an old Hardee's, and it is like he pays you a lot in licensing fee every year. I mean, he sends you a lot of money, and he has a lot of stuff but he's like, he wants a blackout. He wants black pom-poms, honor the black shirts. What do you think of that idea of a blackout?
Well, if you look back at my history, I love doing things with uniforms, and I want every game to have a theme behind it, not just with uniforms. We'll have a homecoming, we'll have a alumni, we'll have Hall of Fame, but I've always loved to do one game. Now, that said, I believe I've never wanted to pick what it looked like. I want the team to pick what it looks like, because if the guys think that they're going to be faster, stronger, and win wearing whatever, then let's wear whatever. That's what it's all about. And the thing about uniform games, and there's been this wave here recently, people talking to me about uniform games. The uniform game that we will be working on will be for 25. The 24 uniforms, those were done almost a year ago. It takes that long. So I don't know what we've got in the closet, and I don't know what Matt and the captains are thinking about wearing, but we'll work toward 25. Now, I'm going to say one more thing to qualify everything. I've also never been in a place that has the history that Nebraska has with a uniform. And it's one thing to step on history. It's another thing to walk on history. And I don't want to walk on history either.
That's the exact question I was going to ask you, because when you were at Tulane, by the way, the Green Wave uniforms, awesome, simply awesome. But you almost had like a blank canvas, because you're like recreating this brand, right? You can put Nebraska's uniforms, and I mean this sincerely, with the Penn States, the Alabamas, just that when you see it, you know it, and there's so much history with that. So that's what you're talking about, walking on it, right?
That's right. You got to be very careful in what you do. And I go back to, I want the guys to feel something when they come out wearing something. And again, it goes back to, does it help us win? I think I know there've been talk about blackout, and I don't know that that's coming. I don't know that that's not coming, at least for the 24 season. But if you think of the history of the black shirts, and you got your colors, just because you wear something, you don't always wear your primary color. And so I'm wide open to a lot of things. I'm most wide open to winning, and what gets us there, that's the answer.
Well, if the uniform helps. I used to be really anti on the alternate uniforms. I don't know. I think I've kind of softened over time.
The only thing you're really anti is the all whites, because you're saying that's the white flag.
Although we tried the all whites one year for our road uniform. That was 1992, and we know how that turned out. Marv Seiler's still running.
Yeah.
Actually,
I remember the game.
But Nebraska went all whites. I can't remember, a couple of years ago, and it was like a logoed NU on the helmet. It had kind of this cool throwback look. I actually really liked that. I thought that was a good look. It was clean. I thought that one actually worked, which is kind of, for me, blasphemy saying that I liked an all-white uniform, but that one actually looked pretty good.
I got to tell you, at Tulane, we had gray pants, a set of gray pants in the closet. Man, those are sharp. We wore those gray pants and got beat, and we didn't wear them again that season. We wore them the next year, got beat, and those gray pants weren't worn for 4 seasons.
They're not coming out of the closet again.
Yep.
Yeah, the all-whites after that Iowa State game, we put those back in the closet.
So we are recording this the day before Big Ten Media Day. You're getting ready to go to Indianapolis, your first Big Ten Media Day, which you were going to be part of regardless, because Washington's part of the Big Ten. What are you expecting in Indianapolis? Because people most likely listen to us when it's all over, but just what are you expecting heading to Indianapolis?
I don't think you will see anyone from Nebraska use it as a torch. I think the understated nature of who Nebraska is and who Nebraskans are is probably what you're going to see from us. It's always interesting to see what comment somebody will make that will catch a life of its own. That'll happen. There's going to be a lot of comments about the future of college athletics, about conference realignment, about the antitrust settlement. That I don't think you'll hear any different. It's just going to be recycled from one conference media day to the other. This will be the last of the conference media days. So I'm not sure there's a lot of new that we're going to see. I've seen a couple of preseason polls that have the Huskers somewhere right in the middle, and my guess is you will hear that used as incentive and motivation. But that's true for everybody that's in the middle of every league. You use it as incentive and motivation. Yeah,
and at the end of the day, you got to earn your way up those polls too, right? It takes a little bit of consistency. I know you're going to be asked about the future of college athletics, and I kind of relate it to AI right now. I mean, the AI of ChatGPT we see today is going to be totally different in 3 weeks, right? How much do you think college athletics, not just football, athletics will change in the next 2 years?
Well, I
didn't mean to stump you.
No. Look back at how much it has changed since COVID, even, and how it continues to evolve. The direct payment to athletes is obviously going to be a shock to a lot of systems. I'm one that still sees employment down the road. Not everybody does, and maybe there'll be some action in the meantime. But I still see us headed toward an employment model. I am one. I don't believe the autonomy schools, the Power 4 schools, Power 3, 2, however many powers we have now. It does require a different set of rules and different set of governance. We got in this position because we governed to the least common denominator. Instead of, basically we put ceilings on everything. And instead of that, we need to elevate floors. And make people invest more and make the floors higher, because the ceiling's never going to be the same. East Coast, West Coast, North, South, climates, there's all sorts of differences. And you can't legislate yourself into everything being the same. This is not the NFL. We're always going to have some nuance and difference. So I think you're going to see a lot of change in how we govern ourselves. I do, and I do want to see everybody playing for the trophy. However, and I went through a thing at Tulane when we beat USC in the Cotton Bowl, right? And it might still go down as the greatest moment in the institution's history from an athletics standpoint. I don't ever want to see that get taken away. And could we have won 4 and won the national championship? A lot of things have to happen there, but I still want everybody to chase that trophy. And if you ever, I said this when I was at Tulane, said it in Northern Iowa, if you ever not chase the same trophy as the biggest of the big do, you lose credibility in the public eye, and I don't want that to happen.
And the reason I think you brought that up, Dennis Dodd at CBSSports.com had a report just, I think, 2 days ago where it talked about the Power Four breaking away and forming its own separate Division I. So from what I hear you saying, and I like that you said that because having that Tulane experience, you understand how important that is. You don't ever want to see it just before and then a Division I and then FCS. You don't want it segmented.
The one thing, and I'm not necessarily privy to what's been going on inside of Indianapolis here lately. I've had my run there in those committees, but don't mistake governance for championships. And how we govern ourselves does not mean that that's the only group that may play in the national championship. So the ability to do some things, if you have floors and no ceilings, everybody can opt in to whatever they want to opt into. I really, really want open access to championships. I want everybody to have a crack at them. Now there comes a level of investment, right? You can't have the rewards of playing for it unless you're willing to invest in your athletes and your programs along the way. But I think you got to look at college athletics differently. People won't, the general public won't track on governance. People don't know now who votes on what and how there's weighted voting if you're in the Power Five, and Power Five can introduce certain legislation that nobody else can. People don't follow that stuff. They don't know that stuff. And frankly, I don't think it impacts anybody's enjoyment of the game. Who's in the championship hunt? That's important.
How big of a playoff? Because we're at what, 12 now?
12.
We're 12. I've having been at Northern Iowa, right, in the FCS playoffs, I saw, it's now at 24.
Yeah.
So the idea of how many games is too many games. We could go to 16, right, and nobody'd play any more than 4 in the playoff. So I don't know that I'd see it growing beyond that. Here's what we'll determine. We'll play a couple of years of this playoff at 12, and the 11 and 12 seeds win a couple of games, and everybody's going to be saying, well, 13 and 14 should have been in. 11 and 12 gets beat pretty handily by 5 and 6 in those first games. Everybody will say, well, the line's drawn at a pretty good place. So, the competitive outcome is going to determine whether I think there's growth, and certainly financially, whether there's upside financially from the television networks to grow the playoff. Playoff is, Bill Hancock did a really remarkable job, I think, trying to balance, when you get past that first week, that championship week in December, and the NFL hits Saturdays, where are their TV windows in order to play these games? You don't want to hide them. You don't want to go too obscure, and you also don't necessarily want to go heads up with the NFL if you don't have to. So I think there's been a nice balance found so far with that. But that's also something that's going to come into play is because of the NFL and college athletics is a behemoth. The NFL is a behemoth, and so you're probably not going to win those battles from a television standpoint. So there's a lot of factors in it. But from a how many games is too many games, you could say if we added 4 more teams, nobody play any more games than they are right now.
Well, and if you did go 4 more games, say you went to a 16-team playoff, and I know it's revenue, and people don't like to lose revenue, but could you see a day where the college or the conference championship games go away, where they wouldn't need to be necessary?
Yes and no. The conference championship games are huge financial engines for leagues and in their own individual league television deals. So, whether if just in theory, and I'm talking not because of any knowledge, but if the Big Ten got $1,000 for its conference championship game, and it went away, and that $1,000 became $900 because you had an extra round of playoffs, then some would say financially we're better off playing the conference championship game. I think. some schools, some leagues were late to adopt conference championships at the beginning. Now, not only they're part of the engine, but it's really a celebration of the season. And as we get away from divisions in the power leagues and the conference championship games are 1 versus 2, I think that is going to be a highlight weekend for everybody, of the games that we're going to get to see.
You talk, and that's something that's always been brought up, is if you start expanding the playoff, you need to get rid of the conference title games. I mean, that's been something that people have put out there extensively. Keep the conference championship game. What is the potential revenue loss, or how detrimental is the revenue loss of shortening the regular season by a game, going to 11-game regular season instead of 12?
Well, at that point in time, I would say you're harming 116 schools who aren't going to play beyond the last week of their regular season.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
So I think they're still going to want the 12. This year, and I think next year is a double bye year, the way the calendar falls. So we have 2 off Saturdays. Long term, I would love to see that become permanent, which would mean starting a week earlier and have 2 off Saturdays during the season. I think that from a rest and recuperation standpoint, with the playoff at the end, would be good. I don't know that I've heard anybody advocate for shortening the college football season necessarily. I think with the current commissioners, there's been some very thoughtful thinking and very thoughtful approach. I tell you, I really like Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner. He is a pusher. He is aggressive, and he has that great balance with professional sports where he understands the monetizing every concession stand and every foot you walk. We're trying to monetize these stadiums. He understands trying to monetize everything about the sport and everything we have as a league. And people hate to hear an college athletic director talking about monetizing things. The reality is the reality. And in this business, if we can keep the holistic in balance with the fiduciary, we're going to have great success. And so we've spent a lot of time on the holistic. It's time to spend time on the fiduciary and make sure they're both going to rise together. They're not going to be exclusive of one another, but it's important. And it's also important. The last point probably is we can't cut people out, and I don't say professional sports necessarily have, but this can't just be a corporate stadium. Maybe the surprise I had was to see how many kids under 10 were at the spring football game. And, if it's $125 a ticket for every game, that's not going to happen. I'm not taking my 10-year-old any place because it's going to be a waste of time, a waste of money. So we want to do concessions different. I want a cheap hot dog and a cheap soda because you have to keep some components to this. Not everything can be monetized, but there is a chance for us to do a lot of that.
How about beer in the stadium? Speaking of which,
by the way, this is one of the few podcasts we're not drinking on.
Yeah,
we're in your office, so we understand.
Which is why we're actually having the podcast, right?
Yeah. We talked about it. We talked about it.
The beer's not going to be made. The decision won't be made by the athletic director or the athletic department. So we'll see if the board is willing to go down that road at some point in time. I do know this: we sell beer at every venue we don't own and compete in, which was Haymarket and the Pinnacle Bank. And I believe now we are the last school in the Big Ten to not sell alcohol. There's a morality judgment that everybody's going to want to make and probably need to make. But as I said, I now have a $20 million line item, and I'm going to manage some of that off the bottom and save some expenses. But I also have to manage that by growing off the top. And so where can we grow? That's an area for growth. But again, I don't want, that is a cart I will not put before the horse, because there is a lot more to that than just my need to grow the budget.
Well, it's interesting because you have experience with this because when I visited the stadium at Tulane, that's the drinking capital of the world is New Orleans, right? I mean,
Wisconsin would argue that.
Well, yeah, but I'm telling you, New Orleans. But there was open. I mean, you served alcohol at that stadium, and it was successful.
First meeting I had when I went to Tulane, I walked into, and it was whether they should serve margaritas just in the club seats or to the entire stadium. And so there are different mindsets every place you go. The one thing that I think has been proven is that when you sell alcohol in the stadium, you actually control behavior better because people don't binge before the game and at halftime, and it's more of a controlled environment, fewer alcohol arrests. Now, I will say this, the one thing that would go along with alcohol is the halftime exit policy probably gets revisited, and
I think you should keep them there.
Right, and so there's a lot of dog catches car, now what, so there are going to be things that maybe even a guy that wants to buy a beer wouldn't like, but I think there's a lot of history that's been built up that you could make the argument. I also understand those who may not be ready for it. It's more than a business decision. It's a cultural decision that people are going to weigh in on.
I got to share my New Orleans story with you. So I had two daughters go to Loyola New Orleans, which if people aren't familiar, it's right next door to Tulane. I mean, Troy went and bought coffee for my daughters when they were serving at PJ's coffee shop. So he would send me photos of my daughters waiting on him. But my oldest daughter Abigail's there for her freshman orientation. And they're in this large room in Loyola, and a mom from an out-of-towner raised her hand and asked the security guard, he goes, "Yes, is this a dry campus?" And the cop just paused and said, "Ma'am, this is New Orleans." And that was her polite way of saying, no, it's not. I mean, that's just how much it's ingrained down there. But it was one of my first New Orleans stories. I was like, wow. Now, when you said, a corporate stadium, because you can do this now, would you ever name Memorial Stadium?
Oh, boy. I hadn't even contemplated that. I don't know what that number would be, but it would be so massive that I don't think anybody would ever do it. And given, it's not Memorial Stadium for the sake of naming it Memorial Stadium. It's named after some pretty important people. And so I'm not sure that would be on my radar screen.
No, there's always a number, right? I mean, if somebody came in and said, "I'll give you $1 billion," you'd have to go, yes.
Then the Travis Justice Stadium is what it shall be. $1 billion. And how long should I hold the check before I cash it?
Eternity. Eternity. Yeah. So, but I mean, you never say never, and I get that. But there is a certain number that it would take.
I don't think you never say never to anything. But also, you don't twist it saying the athletic director wants to name the stadium. Yeah. Because it's certainly not priority. It's not anything that I'm chasing or that I'm willing to chase. There's a lot of things. I think I know the athletic director. There's a lot of things culturally and historically here. I got to understand. There's a lot of landmines. I got to figure out where they're planted. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot to learn. But that name is pretty sacred.
I don't know about your son, but I got to tell you that one of the things that's impressed me the last week in college football that I think will drive even more fan interest, and I'm sure you're seeing it with your student athletes. This EA 25, it's absolutely crazy. I have people now talking to me about college football that I don't think we're college football fans, but just getting that game back into kids' hands, adults' hands, I think has rejuvenated a passion for college football. Have you seen it around here, or even with your student athletes?
Oh, yes.
But it's good for the brand too, right?
It is good for the brand. I'm a Twitter X guy, whatever else, right? That's how I consume news. It's how I consume information, and you can argue if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I can't get on there now and see what's real and what's fake. And so it's hard to differentiate.
I made a post saying basically the same thing, that it's one of those, you can hop on there and you'll see people in an entire Twitter conversation. I get halfway down a thread before I realize, oh wait, they're talking about NCAA 25. They're not talking about
right. Well, and it's kind of Travis. I'm not pro sports gambling, but I'm certainly not anti sports gambling because it engages people in the game. And I want people engaged in the game. Anything we can do to get people engaged in the game. And so, to your point, that's exactly what the game does, what EA Sports does.
When you hear people say, with the money that's flowing around and players getting played, that it's the end of college athletics as we know it, I call BS on them when I'm on my radio show. So I don't know what you're talking about, because you're still watching, you're still going to be a fan of your team. What do you say to somebody who's like, they want to live in the past?
Well, let's talk about the things that were the end of college athletics. Freshman eligibility was the end of college athletics. The ability of athletes to have jobs in the summer was the end of college athletics, because somebody was going to overpay somebody to work at the car wash, right, or drive cars at the dealership. And then it was cost of attendance. Remember when we went to cost of attendance, and that school has $3,000, but our cost of attendance is $2,500, and we'll never get another kid to come to our school. This is woe was us. And then it was NIL, and now it's going to be revenue sharing. All of these points in time where we sometimes as the enterprise have cried wolf and said, oh, woe was us, this is the end of the world. We've only come out of it stronger. This is a part of evolution, the evolution of college athletics. Evolution is not a straight line. Things happen that sometimes you wish wouldn't have happened. But, things are different today in every respect, in every aspect of life than they were yesterday.
Well, and you made some points earlier about the good old days, that 20-year looking back where, well, it was better back then. I remember going back to where schools could stockpile scholarships. Division I college football had, you go back to the 1960s, early 1970s, maybe even, the scholarship limit was like 120?
I think 135 at one time.
Yeah. And so schools would just stockpile kids. And you had guys riding pine for 3 or 4 years that would never play at a given school. There was a lot of spreading of the wealth when those scholarship limits did get cut. All of a sudden, Boise State's playing great football and knocking off Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. Tulane's playing great football. Some of these changes, you can talk about the money. I always kind of viewed the 120, 135 scholarship era as sort of a hoarding of money by... I'm not sure if power elites is the best way to put it, but schools like USC and Michigan and Notre Dame could do that in that era, and that was probably not a good thing, but that was essentially a hoarding of money and use of that by the powers that be. This evolution going to where some of that revenue is going to the players, I think people... If you take a closer look at the good old days, they probably weren't all that great in terms of how everything did play out.
There are people that have an opposition to the sun rising in the east. It's just the way society is, and so I get people that don't like it. I'm not in a position where I can like it or not like it. I have to figure out a way to make it work, and I have to figure out a way, to look around the corner and figure out what's next and get there before everybody else does. So we have some competitive advantage. Like in this business, you wake up in the morning trying to find an edge. And where is that edge? And looking out of your rearview mirror is never the edge. It's always trying to look forward, and that's the challenge we all have. And the other challenge then I think I have personally, and then empowering our staff to do is we then have to make people understand and communicate well and convince people that this is the edge and this is the future and this is why we have to do it, and not just say I said it and thou it shall be, but we have to get people to buy in and understand. And why do you come to Nebraska? You come to Nebraska because you can lead here. You can lead from a competitive standpoint. You lead from a respect standpoint. In some respects, Nebraska's that old E.F. Hutton, right? When E.F. Hutton talks, right, everybody leans in to listen. That's the opportunity we have here, and that's like going back to why is this a top 5 job? Because you can lead. And you can truly try to be visionary and truly try to find the edge that's going to put your program ahead of everybody else.
So, yeah, obviously you talk to Coach Rule a lot, and one of the things that's been floated, I always like how stuff gets teased a little bit to see the reaction. Roster caps has been one of those things that's been teased a little bit. What's the feeling on roster caps? And could you do like this many guys get paid and other people don't get paid? I mean, how could you – are you a fan of the roster cap?
Well, we have a roster cap now, so it's 120. When camp starts a week from Wednesday, we're allowed 120 in camp. We have 150 or 154 in the program right now. We're allowed 120 in camp. Before COVID, that number was 110. During COVID, it grew from 110 to 115 and then again to 120 when all the 60-year kids were hanging around, right? And you didn't want to kick them off and not have freshmen coming in. So we've always had a cap. The question is it a 365-day-a-year cap or is it a cap during the season? And so a lot of times the devil's in details. I don't know that it matters if the cap's 105, 110, or 120 when camp starts. The average team plays 70. The only time that people below 70 play usually is obviously practice, really, really important, but they're not really impacting the outcome of the game for the most part. So I don't know that in the season the number is that important. However, in December when I'm running at 105 and I have 15 graduate in December. So now I'm down to 90. I have another 10 who are out due to injury. So I'm now down to 80 and I have another 15. I think the average in the portal this year was 21. So let's just say 29 down to 60 players. If I'm down to 60 players, and I don't know how many I can bring in a semester. I don't like the look of the spring from a health and safety standpoint. We're going through spring ball. So I'm a believer that we can have a season number, but outside the season, the number is what the number is.
Have you had the opportunity to visit with President Gold at all in your relationship with Jeffrey Gold?
Yeah, I have. Actually, from the day my introductory press conference, we spent the time together. We went to the Cattlemen's Ball together, and we're living about a block away from one another. So, and having dinner on Thursday night. Spent quite a little bit of time with him so far. Wonderful man.
Smart dude.
Oh, crazy smart. But what you want out of your president is a partner. And, I took this job the day I was announced. I think he was announced, and I had an inkling that was going to be him, but I didn't know him from the Man in the Moon. I didn't have a role with him in the search. But I was kind of led to believe during the search that Jeff would be a great partner. And so far, I've seen nothing but that to be a great partner. And, he has a great relationship in Omaha with donors, with supporters. It's really important. I didn't understand the Omaha-Lincoln dynamic about how important it was with both cities to embrace both. I've learned that pretty quickly.
There's a dynamic,
and a lot of cities have it. It's not unique to what we see in Nebraska, but comes in with good relationships. But I talk about alignment a lot. Alignment is not we're all doing the same thing. Alignment is we believe in doing exactly what we need to do to get to a certain outcome. And then back to the job of the athletic directors to get everybody on the road to get there and not let people drive in different roads. That alignment is getting on the same road, but we've got the alignment that we all want to get there. And Dr. Gold has shown me multiple times he wants the same thing. He wants to be engaged with the student athletes. And he said this to me, and I said this earlier in this podcast. We don't want to do anything that embarrasses the state of Nebraska or Nebraskans. We want to, regardless of whether you win or lose, and sometimes you can't control that. What you can control is how you represent everyone and what you do when things don't go that well. So we're in a great alignment there as well.
You mentioned leading. You've been here 4 months. Do you take a year to just, I know you have to be active, just kind of get a 100-foot view of everything and then come in and do a 5-year strategic plan? Have you already done a 5-year strategic? How do you lead? Because there's different ways. Some people jump right in and that can ruin culture. But you
don't have the luxury to wait a year to do anything in this business. You don't have the luxury to wait a month to do anything in this business. And honestly, I'm not a strategic plan guy. And just think what a strategic plan done 5 years ago, what value it would have been. I've asked everybody of a leadership role in the department, I want their goals for the upcoming year. We're going to measure ourselves by those goals. And then next year, I'm going to see their goals again. And those goals need to be progressive from one year to the next. But the world is evolving and changing so quickly. A lot of it's in the courts. A lot of it's outside of our control. I just want to know that we're prepared to adjust to what lies ahead operationally right now in the here and now. Now, there are longer, more strategic goals and visions, but I don't know we can have a plan. I mean, the getting the stadium done would be a part of a strategic plan, but I'm not ready to say in this time we're going to do that, at that time we're going to do this, because there's too many other contingencies, and I don't want to be held to something that I'm not ready to be accountable to necessarily. So the one long-term strategic goal, and I'll say it over and over again, I want to win at everything. Fiscally, socially, academically, competitively. And if we're not winning, at the end of the day, ask yourself why not. When we do evaluations of everything we do, and we're going to say to the coach, to the director of marketing, to everybody that works in this department, are we winning at all four of those things? If not, why? And if we don't have a plan in place to start winning in one of those four things, then I got the wrong people in place. Or we got to be back together and get that plan and get that strategy. It doesn't mean the strategic plan for golf and tennis is going to look a lot different than Matt's looks. And even Fred's is going to look different than Matt's look. So it's very specialized. It's very nuanced. So long answer to a short question. We're not waiting on anything. You don't have the luxury. And culture is about people. It's not about decisions. I've told everybody I have to come to you. I have to meet you where you're at, except for one thing, and that's urgency. You have to meet me. And if your urgency is not going to be at my level, then we're both going to have a problem. Because every day that you're not moving forward, somebody else is. And we don't have the luxury of letting anybody. We're trying to catch people right now. We're not trying to avoid people behind us.
And there's going to be mistakes along the way. Urgency, because you learn and then move on, right? Because, This is moving at a rapid pace.
It is, and there are mistakes. You hope, like I brought a staff together that's got a lot of experience. They've been a lot of places that look like us, some even places that are bigger than us. You hope by that experience and the fact that you don't do anything unilaterally, that you get everybody's input and you make fewer mistakes. But you know what? I don't know how many I've made today, but I've made enough. I'll get home tonight and Amy will tell you I made even more than I thought I made. But then you don't make the same one twice.
Have you felt at home since day one?
Without question. People. It's like it's who I grew up with. It's where I grew up. The best thing I've done, the Cattleman's Ball, was a blast because it was conversations I haven't had since I was in high school with people about things that I grew up with, and it just felt like back to the good old days, right? It was the people that I grew up with, people my wife grew up with. Nothing to get our best friends are in New Orleans, and some of them are coming up. Some will be here for the Colorado game. Some are coming up in the next couple of weeks. But this is home. Isn't any question about it. Now, I don't tell people my wife graduated from Iowa, and it's been made.
I liked her.
That we're both from Iowa, but I would say the Midwest ethic is real.
I don't think listen, and I deal with my radio show, and you see it all the time. The fandom that takes place. If people only knew how culturally the states are pretty similar, right? It's a work ethic. I think everybody has that similar work.
Here's the one thing I've said to everybody here that's from here and that's only worked here. You do not appreciate what we have here. Having been at some other places and not just worked at other places, have been at other places and talked to other people, we have something really, really special here. And sometimes when this is all you've known, you get blinded to the warts that you've seen along the way and not appreciate what we have. The warts here are aspirational to most. And it's important that we remember that when times are tough. That's why I tend to not get too low. And even the day, you had days that don't go well, even in the short term. I don't get too low, because I'm like, man, I've always wanted to have that problem.
I think Rob's going to be back for the Colorado game. That's your 30-year anniversary of the '94 national championship team, right? So he's excited about that.
That is. I just talked to Bill Byrne, and he's coming back.
Is he?
Yep. So
I still trade messages with Bill on occasion.
Yep.
So.
Yep, called to invite him, and so looking forward to seeing him. And obviously, I've worked a lot with his son, who's at Alabama now, and it's it's about relationships and about
world.
people, and you never forget, no matter who you grew up in high school with, and no matter who you work with along the way, the ties that you had as an athlete here probably is as deep as any ties. The ties our athletes are growing today.
Still keep in touch with those guys.
As deep as any ties. Yeah. Still about relationships.
Well, and our relationship goes back 30 years, and the reason you probably did this podcast.
It probably is. Now, I tell you, I wasn't ready to go to the basement
Twice
yet.
now.
I'm telling you, I know why you were worried about the basement. And when it's getting rebuilt right now, and I promise we will not put you in any compromising position. You come up. We'll keep it clean. We won't drink.
Don't make it weird, Travis.
I know. I didn't mean it like that. But we won't drink any beer during that podcast, and then we'll take you out for dinner.
I will tell you this. I judge everybody on, do you help us win? And people's involvement. I appreciate the fact that you're supporting the Huskers, and people that support the Huskers help us win.
Don't tell people that I'm doing that.
Travis,
I know what you're doing.
Loves the Huskers.
I was talking about Rob, but you too.
No, it's interesting because people know that I'm from Iowa. I do a radio show in Iowa, and they I grew up an Iowa fan. I'm not going to apologize for that, right?
No.
But I've always said this. I never did not like Nebraska. It's just I covered them I was such when you're in the media, you cover them. It's a different perspective, right? Rob wouldn't like me if
I just always kind of wonder, you're a Grandview grad. How come you hate the Grandview Vikings? We never talk about
Joe Woodley
them.
is still yet to lose a regular season game at Grandview, just to let you know. Good football program.
Even a better wrestling program right now.
Yes, very much so. And Rob knows that. By the way, women's wrestling, Rob wants you to have women's wrestling at Nebraska. Make it happen.
Well, it's hard to envision adding sports right now.
I was going to wait and ask that after we were off the pod.
That'll be on the next podcast, which will take place hopefully from the basement and in a newly designed studio. For Troy Dannen, Athletic Director at Nebraska, for Dr. Rob Zadiska, for our producer, Mr. Owen Justice, I'm Travis Justice. Thank you for listening to the Doc Talk Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.